Welcome to Inside the Philippines. I'm your host, and today we're sharing a story that might save you from making a very expensive mistake. This is Colm's story. He's 57, from Dublin. Worked scaffolding his whole life, hard graft, honest work, the kind that breaks your body down but builds your character up. When he retired with a decent pension and some savings, he thought he'd earned a peaceful chapter. The Philippines promised him that warm weather, low cost of living, a fresh start. And for a while, it delivered. But what started as budget-friendly paradise turned into something else entirely. The numbers he was seeing online, the lifestyle those expat YouTubers were selling, none of it accounted for what actually happens when you become part of a Filipino family. This one's going to stick with you, because Colm's not bitter, he's not angry, he's just stuck, watching his money disappear faster than he ever imagined, unable to go back but unable to move forward. Here's his story. In his own words, right, so, where to start? My name's Colm, I'm 57, and I spent the better part of 4 decades working scaffolding jobs around Ireland. Dublin mostly, some in Cork, anywhere there was a building going up or coming down. It's honest work, scaffolding. You're up at 5:30, on site by 6, and you don't stop until your body tells you the day's done. Your hands get hard, your knees get dodgy, and your back reminds you every morning exactly how many years you've put in. But there's pride in it, you know? Pride in showing up, in doing the job proper, in being the bloke the foreman could rely on. I never married. Always meant to. There were a couple of girls over the years, but I was knackered most nights, and there was always another job coming up, always overtime if you wanted it. I told myself I'd settle down later, when things slowed down, when I had enough put away. Classic mistake, that. You keep pushing it off until one day you wake up and realize later has arrived and you're on your own. Retired at 55. The knees couldn't take it anymore, and I'd qualified for my pension. Had about €130,000 saved up, which felt like a decent cushion. Thought I'd earned some peace, hadn't I? 38 years of graft, never missed a day unless I was half dead, paid my taxes, kept my nose clean. Time to enjoy life a bit, maybe travel, see what retirement was supposed to feel like. Except it felt like nothing. That's the thing nobody tells you about retirement when you've defined yourself by your work your whole life. I moved into a smaller flat in Drimna, sold off most of my furniture, figured I'd simplify, and then I just sat there. My mates were still working. My sister had her own family, her own life. We're close enough, but not the sort to be ringing each other daily. I'd wake up with nowhere to be, nothing to do, nobody needing me for anything. 8 months of that. 8 months of staring at rain on the windows, scrolling through my phone, walking down to the shop for a paper I didn't really want to read, coming back to an empty flat. I wasn't depressed exactly, but I wasn't living either. I was just taking up space, killing time until I don't know what. It's a terrible feeling, being useless. When you've spent your whole life being useful, being needed on a job site, having purpose, losing, that is like losing a limb. I met Tommy at the pub one night. Used to work on the same crew as me years back, retired a bit earlier than I did. He looked tanned, healthy, happy. We got talking, and he mentioned he'd been spending winters in Thailand. Cheap as chips, he said. Warm. Your pension goes 10 times further. He showed me photos on his phone beaches, cheap beer, him grinning like he'd won the lottery. That got me thinking. I started watching YouTube videos about retiring abroad, and that's when I stumbled onto the Philippines channels. These expat lads living on the beach, showing their monthly budgets, 500, 600 euros a month, all in. Nice apartments, eating out every day, beer cheap as water, local women friendly and respectful to older blokes. They made it look like paradise for pensioners. English-speaking country, warm weather year-round, your money stretching so far you could live like a king on an Irish pension. I watched dozens of those videos. Budget breakdowns, cost of living comparisons, tour of apartments you could rent for €200 a month. There was this one channel, this British bloke living in a place called Dumaguete, showing his seaside condo, eating fresh fish for a couple of quid, swimming every morning. He looked peaceful, content, like he'd figured something out that I was still missing. I started researching properly. The Philippines has this retirement visa called SRRV, Special Resident Retirees Visa. You put down a deposit with a bank, about 10 grand, depending on which type you get, and you're sorted for residency. The money sits there, you can't touch it, but it's yours and it gets you legal status. Seems straightforward enough. I did the math, my pension would cover €600 a month easy, and I'd never need to touch my savings. Those could sit there for emergencies, for travel, whatever. February 2023, I made the decision. Sold my furniture, packed 2 proper bags, applied for the visa online. Told my sister I was off to the Philippines for a while, see how it suited me. She thought I'd lost the plot, but she didn't try to stop me. What was there to stay for, anyway? More rain? More sitting alone in a flat watching the walls? I wasn't running toward something, if I'm being honest. I was running from something, from that suffocating emptiness, from feeling like a ghost in my own life. The Philippines wasn't about finding paradise. It was about finding a reason to wake up in the morning. About building something, even if that something was just a simple, dignified life, somewhere I could afford to breathe. I booked a one-way ticket to Manila, departure March 15th, 2 bags, €130,000 in the bank, a pension that would pay me every month like clockwork, and absolutely no idea what I was walking into. Looking back now, I should have wondered why all those YouTube videos never mentioned the part that comes after you arrive, the part where you stop being a tourist and start being someone's opportunity. But I was 57, lonely and desperate for purpose. That's a dangerous combination anywhere in the world, but especially in the Philippines. I landed in Manila on a Tuesday morning, and everything changed. The heat hit me like a wall the second I stepped off the plane. Proper tropical heat, the kind that makes your shirt stick to your back before you've even cleared immigration. Manila Airport was chaos, crowds everywhere. Signs in English and Tagalog, touts trying to grab your bags, everyone shouting. I'd traveled a bit in my day, construction jobs in Spain and Portugal, but this was different. This felt foreign in a way Europe never did. I'd joined an expat Facebook group for the Philippines before I left, and lads on there recommended Dumaguete for retirement. Smaller city, they said, safer. University town, so everyone speaks English, beautiful coastline, cheaper than Manila or Cebu. I booked a domestic flight that same day, couple hours south to the Visayas region. By the time I landed in Dumaguete that evening, I was knackered but buzzing with something I hadn't felt in months. Possibility, maybe. Hope. The difference from Manila was immediate. Dumaguete felt manageable, still chaotic by Irish standards, but you could see the edges of it. Tricycles everywhere instead of massive traffic jams. The seafront boulevard lined with palm trees. Mountains visible in the distance. The air smelled like salt and grilled fish and diesel fumes, and karaoke was blasting from somewhere down the street even though it was barely 7 in the evening. I grabbed a tricycle to a guest house I'd found online, paid 40 pesos less than €1, and the driver grinned like I'd tipped him a fortune. First week I stayed in that guest house while I sorted accommodation. The expat group had listings, and I found a 1-bedroom condo near the university for 15,000 pesos a month. I did the conversion, about €250. Furnished, aircon, walking distance to the boulevard and the public market. The landlady was Filipino, maybe 60, spoke perfect English, asked if I was retired. When I said yes, she told me about the SRRV visa process, gave me the number for an agent who could help with the paperwork. The agent was efficient, I'll give her that. Cost me about 8,000 pesos in fees, Plus, I had to deposit 50,000 pesos with a local bank as part of the SRRV requirements. That's the money you can't touch, sits there as your visa bond. But within 2 weeks, I had my retirement visa sorted, my ACRI card on the way, legal residency in the Philippines. The whole process felt shockingly straightforward compared to the bureaucracy back home. My first full month in Dumaguete, I tracked every peso. Old habit from construction, you learn to account for materials, labor, costs. Rent was 15,000. Food ran me about 9,000. I was eating at local spots, carinderias they call them, these little family-run places where you point at what looks good and they serve you rice and 3 dishes for 150 pesos, maybe €2. Utilities were about 2,500, electric, water, internet, miscellaneous, another 5,000 for toiletries, a few beers, getting settled. Total came to just under 40,000 pesos, right around €650. Exactly what YouTube promised. I remember sitting on my balcony that first month, beer in hand, doing the math in my head and feeling vindicated. My pension covered this easily with money left over. My savings could sit untouched. I'd done it. I'd actually bloody done it. I fell into a routine fast because that's what I needed. Structure, purpose, even without work. Up at 6, down to the boulevard for a swim. The water was warm, clear, nothing like the Irish Sea that'd freeze your bollocks off. After the swim, I'd grab breakfast at a bakery pandesal. These little bread rolls, and instant coffee that was too sweet. But I got used to it. Then I'd walk to the public market, buy vegetables and fish for the day, practice my terrible Cebuano with the vendors who found my accent hilarious. Afternoons I'd read, walk around, maybe have a beer at one of the spots along the boulevard watching the sunset. Evenings I'd eat at different carinderias trying everything. The simplicity of it felt revolutionary. Anonymous but visible, foreign but welcomed. I wasn't Combe the scaffolder anymore, but I was something the Irish bloke at the market, the Kano who swam every morning, the older foreigner who said "Salamat" instead of just "thanks." I had a daily rhythm that didn't depend on a job site but still gave me purpose. My landlady suggested I try Sunday Mass at the cathedral if I was looking for community. I'm not particularly religious Christmas and Easter sort of Catholic, but I was looking for connection, so I went. The church was packed, families dressed up proper, the service in English and Tagalog mixed together. I sat in the back, just observing, and after Mass there was coffee and biscuits in a courtyard area. That's where I met Maricel. She was helping serve the coffee, chatting with people, laughing easy. Maybe 42, pleasant-looking, wearing a simple floral dress. She noticed me standing there awkward and came over, asked if I was new in Dumaguete. I told her I'd just moved here, retired from Ireland. She asked about Ireland, said she'd never been but always wanted to see Dublin. We talked for maybe 15 minutes, just friendly conversation. She worked at a bakery in town, volunteered with the church charity committee, had 2 daughters in school. What struck me was how normal it felt. She wasn't hovering around the expat bars like the girls I'd been warned about online. She wasn't on Filipino Cupid or Tinder fishing for foreign boyfriends. She had a life, a job, responsibilities. She was just being friendly to a new face at church. We exchanged numbers, she said, if I needed help finding anything in town, just message her. Over the next few weeks, we'd text occasionally, nothing heavy. She'd recommend good places to eat. I'd ask her what certain Cebuano phrases meant. Then, one day, she suggested coffee if I was free. Showed me this spot near the market that did halo halo. This dessert thing with shaved ice and sweet beans and fruit. Sounds mad, but it was brilliant in the heat. We started meeting maybe once a week. She'd finish her shift at the bakery, we'd have merienda snack time. They take it serious here and just talk. She told me about her daughters, 16 and 14, both bright as anything. Her husband had left years back, Married someone else down in Mindanao, never sent money. She was raising the girls alone with help from her parents who lived in a barangay outside the city. She worked hard, made enough to get by, dreamed of her eldest going to university. I told her about Ireland, about scaffolding, about how retirement felt like losing my purpose. She understood that in a way I hadn't expected. Said Filipinos don't really retire, you work until you can't anymore, and then your children take care of you. The whole concept of stopping work at 55 with a pension seemed bizarre to her. By August, we were seeing each other regularly, not living together, nothing rushed, just genuine companionship. She'd bring me pan de coco from the bakery, these sweet coconut rolls. I'd bring her coffee from the good place near my condo. She showed me around, properly took me to watch basketball at the local court where kids played barefoot, introduced me to her friends from church, taught me how to say basic things in Cebuano beyond salamat and mahal, which apparently means expensive or love depending on context. It felt real, organic, nothing like the horror stories I'd read online about bar girls scamming expats or women juggling 5 foreign boyfriends for money. Maricel had a life before I showed up, and would have a life if I left. That's what made it feel different. That's what made me think maybe, just maybe, this could be something good. Looking back now, I can see how perfectly it was all calibrated. The slow build. The authentic friendship before anything romantic. The way she never asked for anything directly. But at the time, I just felt grateful. Grateful to have met someone kind who made this foreign place feel less foreign. Grateful to have a reason to look forward to Sundays. Grateful to matter to someone again. I'd been in Dumaguete 6 months. My budget was holding steady, my routine was solid, and I had something resembling a social life. The loneliness that had driven me out of Ireland felt like a distant memory. I was building exactly the simple, dignified life I'd hoped for. What I didn't realize was that I hadn't built anything yet. I just laid the foundation for someone else's construction project, and the real costs were about to start piling up. September came with the rainy season, and that's when Maricel first mentioned her father's eyes. We were having coffee at our usual spot near the market, and she seemed distracted, quieter than normal. I asked if everything was all right. She said yes, then no, then explained that her father, was having trouble seeing. Cataracts, the doctor said. Getting worse. He could barely tend his small vegetable plot anymore, couldn't see well enough to do much of anything. The worry in her voice was genuine. This wasn't her asking for help. This was her explaining why she seemed stressed. I asked what could be done about it. She said surgery, but it cost 45,000 pesos, and they didn't have that kind of money. Her parents lived on almost nothing. Her father's vegetables, a bit of help from her when she could spare it, whatever extended family could chip in. 45,000 pesos might as well have been 1,000,000. I did the math in my head. About 750 euros. I had that. I had way more than that sitting in the bank doing nothing. And this was fixable, you know? This wasn't some impossible problem. It was a straightforward medical procedure that would give an old man his sight back. How could I not help with that? I offered. Told Maricel I'd pay for the surgery. She cried, actually cried, said she couldn't accept that, it was too much. I insisted, told her I wanted to help, that I could afford it, that watching someone suffer when you have the means to fix it just felt wrong. She hugged me right there in the cafe, said I was a blessing, that God had brought me into their lives for a reason. The surgery happened 2 weeks later at a private hospital in Dumaguete. I went with Maricel and her mother. The whole thing took maybe 3 hours. When her father came out of recovery, the doctor said it went perfectly. In a few weeks, he'd see clear as day. That's when I met the family properly. They invited me to their home in the barangay for a thank-you meal the following Sunday. Maricel picked me up on a habal. Habal, one of those motorcycle taxis, and we rode about 20 minutes outside Dumaguete into the countryside. Proper rural Philippines. Concrete houses with corrugated metal roofs, chickens running around, kids playing in the dirt roads. The smell of cooking fires and that distinctive smell of provincial life, earth and animals and vegetation, all mixed together. Her family's house was modest. Single story, maybe 3 rooms, cement floors, painted concrete walls with religious pictures everywhere. But they'd gone all out for the meal. Roasted chicken, pork adobo, mountains of rice, fresh mango, San Miguel beer in a cooler. Her father sat there with bandages still over his eyes, shaking my hand over and over, saying, "Salamat, salamat," like I'd saved his life. Her mother kept serving me more food, wouldn't let my plate get empty. Neighbors dropped by to meet the Kano who'd helped Tatay see again. The warmth was overwhelming. These were good people, genuinely grateful, treating me like family. Maricel's brother, maybe 35, clapped me on the shoulder and said I was part of the family now. Her daughter, shy but sweet, called me Kuya Kom, which Maricel explained meant older brother or uncle, a term of respect and affection. They wanted to hear about Ireland, about snow, about what Dublin looked like. I felt useful again. Needed. My money had solved a real problem for real people, and the gratitude wasn't transactional. It felt genuine. I told myself this was different from the stories online. This wasn't some bar girl bleeding a lonely foreigner dry. This was helping people I cared about, people who cared about me. Maricel had never asked for a single peso I'd offered. That distinction felt important. October brought another request, though this one Maricel did bring to me directly. Her eldest daughter, the bright one, had been accepted to Foundation University in Dumaguete. Proper university, decent reputation. The daughter wanted to study education, become a teacher, but tuition was 18,000 pesos per semester, and Maricel was scrambling. She'd been saving what she could from the bakery, but it wasn't enough. She mentioned maybe the girl would work for a semester, save up, start university next year. I couldn't let that happen. Education matters, you know. This girl had worked hard, gotten accepted, wanted to better herself. Delaying felt criminal when I had money sitting in the bank doing nothing. I told Maricel I'd cover the tuition. She protested, said I'd already done too much, but I insisted. 18,000 pesos was about 300 euros. Nothing, really. An investment in a young person's future, the daughter cried when she found out, wrote me this letter in careful English thanking me, promising to work hard, saying she'd make me proud. Made me feel like a proper grandfather even though I had no kids of my own. Maricel said I was changing their lives, giving them opportunities they never thought possible. Then November hit with a typhoon. Not a huge one by Philippine standards, but enough to cause damage. Maricel called me in a panic. Their roof was leaking badly, water pouring into the house. I told her I'd come have a look. When I got to the barangay, the situation was worse than I'd pictured. The corrugated metal roof had holes rusted through, and during the heavy rain it was like standing under a sieve. Water everywhere, their few possessions getting soaked. Her mother trying to catch it in buckets. This wasn't cosmetic damage. This was structural failure that would only get worse. My scaffolding background kicked in. I could see this needed proper work, new sheeting, support beams checked, the whole roof redone basically. I got quotes from local workers, did the measurements myself, oversaw the job. Cost came to 65,000 pesos, about 1,000 euros. I paid for materials, hired the crew, even climbed up myself to inspect the work because old habits die hard. First time in months my professional skills actually mattered. The family was overwhelmed. They threw a small celebration when the work finished. Neighbors came, there was lechon, everyone thanking me, treating me like I'd built them a mansion instead of just fixing a roof. Maricel's brother kept saying I was family now. that I understood utang na loob, the debt of gratitude. Her mother blessed me, made the sign of the cross over my head. They included me in family prayers that night, asking God to bless the man who'd helped them. I felt good, genuinely good. This was what retirement should be, using my resources and skills to help people, being part of a community, mattering. The money didn't hurt me. I still had over 120,000 euros in the bank. My pension covered my living expenses. These were one-time helps for genuine needs. By January, I sat down and calculated properly. In 5 months, I'd spent about 45,000 pesos on the surgery, 18,000 on tuition, 65,000 on the roof. Call it 130,000 pesos total, roughly 2,000 euros. My monthly expenses had crept up a bit too. I was eating with the family sometimes, bringing food when I visited, small gifts here and there. Monthly average now maybe 55,000 pesos, about 900 euros. Still reasonable, I told myself. Still well within my pension. I'd helped people I cared about, solved fixable problems, become part of something bigger than myself. This wasn't being scammed. This was building genuine relationships, investing in people who'd welcomed me with open arms. I should have seen it, though. Should have recognized the pattern being established. Every need I met created the expectation I'd meet the next one. Every problem I solved made me the solution to future problems. Every peso I spent wove me deeper into an obligation structure I didn't fully understand. But I was too busy feeling needed to notice I was being needed for the wrong reasons. Too busy feeling purposeful to realize the purpose was becoming an ATM with a heartbeat. Too busy feeling like family to understand that in Filipino culture, family meant something very different than it did back in Ireland. The foundation was laid. The construction project was about to begin in earnest, and the costs were going to escalate far faster than I'd ever imagined. February 2024. The requests started coming from beyond Maricel's immediate family. First, it was her nephew Kid, maybe 12 years old, needed medicine. Maricel sent me a message on Facebook Messenger with a photo of the prescription. 3,500 pesos, about 60 euros. Antibiotics for an infection. I approved it through GCash without even thinking twice. A kid needs medicine, you help. Simple as that. Then her aunt needed diabetes medication. 4,200 pesos. Then a cousin's daughter was graduating elementary school and needed money for the ceremony fees and new clothes. 2,000 pesos. Each request came with detailed explanations, photos of prescriptions or school letters, proof these were legitimate needs, and they were small enough that refusing felt petty. What kind of man says no to a kid's medicine or graduation fees when he's got money sitting in the bank? But looking back now, February was when the network expanded. When I went from helping Maricel's parents and daughters to becoming the solution for the entire extended family, I didn't realize I'd crossed a line from boyfriend helping his partner to foreign ATM for 23 people I'd barely met. March brought my first proper cost increase. My landlady informed me the rent was going up to 18,000 pesos starting next month. Inflation, she said. Property taxes increased. Apologetic but firm. That pushed my rent from 250 euros to 300. Still reasonable by Western standards, but that was a 20% jump in 1 year. I started noticing other costs creeping up too. Rice had gone up 15% at the market. Vegetables were dearer. My daily food budget that had been 300 pesos was now pushing 400 to 500 to eat the same way. The vendors apologized, said everything costs more now, blamed the government, blamed imports, blamed weather. I wasn't being ripped off. Prices were genuinely rising faster than I'd expected. Then there was my blood pressure medication. I'd been diagnosed with hypertension years back in Dublin, managed it with pills. In Ireland, it was covered by the health system. Here I was paying out of pocket 2,800 pesos monthly, about 45 euros. Not massive, but it added up. No health insurance would take me at my age with pre-existing conditions, so everything medical was cash. I sat down properly in March and tracked every expense for the month. Rent, 18,000. Food, 15,000. Utilities, 3,000. Medication, 2,800. GCash transfers to Maricel's family another 10,000 between the nephew's medicine and a few other small requests. Miscellaneous, 5,000. Total came to about 75,000 pesos, roughly 1,200 euros. My pension covered it, but barely, and I'd gone from having money left over each month to breaking even. The cushion was disappearing. April and May brought wedding season. I didn't know that was a thing here, but apparently summer months are when everyone gets married. Maricel's cousin, her second cousin, someone from church she'd grown up with. Each wedding invitation came with the expectation of a contribution, 5,000 pesos here, 3,000 there. Not Maricel asking directly, mind you. The family members would message me on Facebook, Kuya Colm, "You are invited to the wedding of," with bank details for the gift. I learned quickly that saying no meant losing face, caused offense. These weren't optional. If you're considered family, you contribute. Simple as that. Then Mother's Day hit. I'd somehow become ninong godfather to Maricel's niece during her confirmation ceremony back in March. I hadn't understood what I was agreeing to at the time. Thought it was just standing there during the ceremony. Bit of an honor. Turned out ninong comes with obligations. Gifts for special occasions. Financial support when needed. Another thread in the web of utang na loob I was learning about too late. I gave gifts to Maricel's mother, to her aunt, to the niece I was supposedly godfather to. Another 12,000 pesos gone, couple hundred euros, for a holiday I'd never thought about back in Ireland. By June, I was starting to feel the weight of it. Not financially broke. I still had my savings, but the mental weight of being the solution to every problem. My phone would ping with GCash requests, Facebook messages with photos of sick relatives or broken appliances or school fees. Each individual request was reasonable, small, genuine, but together they were becoming a torrent I couldn't keep up with. June brought Maricel's youngest daughter's high school graduation. The girl needed a new uniform for the ceremony, graduation fees, contributions to the class celebration. 12,000 pesos total, about 200 euros. I paid because how could I not? I'd already put the eldest through university. Refusing to help the youngest graduate high school would have been cruel. July was when things really started to unravel. Though I didn't see it clearly yet, Maricel's brother, the one who'd called me family after the roof repair, his tricycle broke down. And this wasn't just transportation. This was his livelihood. He drove a tricycle for income, ferrying people around the barangay, earning maybe 300 pesos a day when he was working. His whole family depended on that income. The motor needed replacing. 28,000 pesos, about 450 euros. He came to me directly, showed me the mechanic's quote, explained how his family would struggle without the income. What was I supposed to do? Let them starve because I wanted to hold on to money I wasn't even using? I paid for the tricycle repair. But for the first time, I hesitated before approving the GCash transfer. For the first time, I felt resentment creeping in alongside the generosity. I sat down end of July and did the math properly. My monthly outflow was averaging 110,000 pesos, about 1,800 euros, when you factored in the irregular requests on top of normal living expenses. I dipped into my savings by about 8,000 euros over the past year. Not catastrophic, but the trajectory was wrong. I was supposed to be living on my pension with savings untouched. Instead, I was bleeding money monthly with no end in sight. And here's the thing that was starting to eat at me. Maricel's warmth felt conditional now. When I approved requests quickly, she was affectionate, grateful, told me I was a blessing. When I hesitated, asked questions, tried to understand if something was really urgent, she'd go quiet, distant, wounded, like I'd betrayed her by not immediately opening my wallet. I tried talking to her about it once in July, said I needed to be more careful with money, that the requests were adding up faster than I'd expected. She cried, told me she never asked me for anything, that her family's needs were genuine, that she couldn't help it if life was hard for them. Said maybe I didn't understand Filipino culture, didn't understand how families take care of each other here. That last bit stung because she was right. I didn't understand. In Ireland, family helps each other, sure, but there's limits, boundaries. Boundaries. You don't become financially responsible for your girlfriend's nephew's medicine or her cousin's wedding or her brother's work vehicle. But here, those boundaries didn't seem to exist. Here, family meant something vast and all-encompassing that I'd stumbled into without realizing what I was agreeing to. The worst part? The needs were genuine. That's what made it impossible to just walk away. These weren't scammers inventing fake emergencies. The nephew really did need antibiotics. The tricycle really was broken. The graduations were really happening. The poverty was grinding and real and everywhere I looked. But I was one man on a fixed income trying to solve structural poverty for 23 people. And I was starting to realize that wasn't sustainable, that there would always be another emergency, another need, another crisis that only Kuya Calm's money could fix. I should have set boundaries from the start, should have said from day one that I'd help Maricel and her immediate family, but that was it. Should have recognized that every yes made the next no harder. Should have understood that in Filipino culture I wasn't just dating Maricel, I was marrying into an extended family structure with obligations I couldn't begin to fulfill. But I'd been so desperate to feel needed, so grateful to have purpose again, so hungry for the warmth of being called family, that I'd said yes to everything until yes became expected and no became betrayal. By the end of July, I was spending more than my pension covered. I was into my savings, and the requests weren't slowing down. And I couldn't see a way out that didn't make me the villain, the rich foreigner who helped for a while, then abandoned them when they needed him most. I was trapped. Not by deception exactly, but by my own generosity weaponized against me through cultural expectations I'd never understood in the first place. The foundation was finished. The walls were going up, and I was the one paying for construction on a house I'd never own, in a family I'd never truly belonged to, funding obligations that would never end. August 2024 hit me with a double blow. My landlady knocked on my door with apologetic eyes and a lease renewal form. 22,000 pesos monthly starting next month. Up from 18,000. That's 370 euros versus 300. Another jump. Another bite out of my pension. She explained that property values were rising, taxes going up, maintenance costs increasing. I couldn't really argue. Dumaguete was growing, getting more popular with expats and tourists. My condo was still decent value compared to what I'd pay back home, but it stung. That was nearly 50% more than I'd started paying 18 months ago for the exact same place. Then came my SRRV visa annual reporting. I'd forgotten about that cost. 10,000 pesos in fees just to confirm I was still living here, still retired, still had my deposit sitting untouched in the bank. Plus, I needed a new ACR. I card my alien certificate of registration. Another 3,000 pesos. Bureaucratic costs I hadn't budgeted for properly. And then my tooth cracked. Upper molar, back left. I'd been putting off dental work because it's expensive and I didn't have coverage, but this wasn't something I could ignore. The pain was brutal. Went to a private dentist in Dumaguete. Filipino trained but spoke perfect English, seemed competent enough. She said I needed a crown. 45,000 pesos, about 750 euros. No insurance, no payment plan, just cash up front. I sat in that dentist's chair with my mouth full of gauze and instruments thinking about how this one tooth was costing me as much as I'd spent on Maricel's father's entire cataract surgery. The irony wasn't lost on me. By the end of August, I'd tallied it up. I was 18,000 euros into my savings over 18 months. My nest egg down to 112,000 euros. Still a decent amount, but the trajectory was terrifying. At this rate, I'd burn through everything in 6 years, maybe less. September brought something new. Maricel started talking about improvements to her family's home. Not asking directly, mind you, just dreaming aloud. Showing me sketches her daughter had drawn of what a proper bedroom for her aging parents might look like. Bathroom improvements so they wouldn't have to use the squat toilet outside. Maybe a small extension, nothing fancy, just enough to make their lives easier. She showed me cost estimates from a local contractor. 180,000 pesos, about 3,000 euros. She mentioned it was something she hoped to save for someday, when they had enough. Then she'd look at me with those soft eyes and say, "When we have enough." We. That word hung there like a trap waiting to spring. I felt the walls closing in. If we were building a future together, wasn't this an investment in that future? But we weren't married. We'd never even talked about marriage, seriously. The house was in her family's name. Under Philippine law, I couldn't own land anyway. Foreigners can't, full stop. If I paid for that extension, I'd have zero legal claim to it. Zero protection. Just another 180,000 pesos flowing from my account into theirs with nothing but gratitude and obligation in return. I told her I needed to think about it. She smiled, said of course there was no rush, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. October through December was a blur of escalating requests. The family's electric fan died. 3,500 pesos for a new one because the heat was unbearable and her parents' health was suffering. Then the rice cooker broke. 4,800 pesos. Small appliances, but they added up. Maricel's grandfather got hospitalized in November. Pneumonia. 12,000 pesos for the hospital stay that insurance didn't cover because he didn't have insurance. Then 6,000 more in medications he needed to take home. I paid because what else could I do? Let an old man suffer. Christmas approached, and with it came expectations I hadn't fully grasped the year before. I was expected to give gifts to everyone. Maricel's parents, her daughters, her brother's family, extended relatives I'd met once or twice. Cash gifts, they call them here. Bonuses. Because I was family now, and that's what family does at Christmas. I spent 28,000 pesos on Christmas alone. Gifts, contributions to the family celebration, food I brought, money slipped into envelopes for everyone. About 460 euros. More than I used to spend on Christmas back in Ireland, including gifts for my sister's entire family. That's when Maricel sat me down and explained utang na loob. She'd mentioned it before, but now she really spelled it out. The debt of gratitude. Her family owed me utang na loob for everything I'd done. The surgery, the roof, the tuition, all of it. That debt could only be repaid through loyalty and love and treating me like true family. But here's the bit she emphasized. I had obligations too. They'd welcomed me into their family, fed me at their table, treated me with respect and affection, included me in their prayers and their lives. Walking away now, refusing to help when they needed me, that would be shameful, cruel even. It would violate the utang na loob I owed them for accepting me. The guilt was overwhelming. She wasn't threatening me. She wasn't demanding anything. She was just explaining how things worked here. Why saying no to family needs was such a deep betrayal in Filipino culture. And the worst part? She believed it. This wasn't manipulation in the Western sense. This was genuinely how she saw the world, how she'd been raised to understand family obligation. The poverty was real. The needs were genuine. The cultural expectations were sincere. But they were also impossible for me to sustain. December alone cost me 150,000 pesos between the Christmas expenses, an emergency when Maricel's aunt needed medication, and regular monthly costs that kept climbing. That's 2,400 euros. In 1 month, I sat down New Year's Day 2025 and did the full accounting. Got out my bank statements, my GCash history, every receipt I'd saved. Made a proper spreadsheet like I used to do for construction jobs. 22 months in the Philippines. 195,000 euros gone from my original 130,000, but I hadn't spent 195,000. Some of that was the 50,000 euro SRRV deposit sitting in the bank, technically still mine, so call it 145,000 spent total. I broke it down. Rent over 22 months, 79,000 pesos average monthly, that's 87,000 total, about 14,000 euros. Food averaging 12,000 pesos monthly, 17,000 euros total. Utilities, visa fees, miscellaneous regular expenses, another 7,000 euros. Healthcare, including the tooth and medication, 6,000 euros. That's 44,000 euros on my own living expenses, which left 32,000 euros. 32,000 euros that went to Maricel's family in less than 2 years. Surgery, roof, tuition, tricycle, weddings, graduations, appliances, medications, Christmas gifts, emergency after emergency after emergency. My savings were down to 98,000 euros. I burned through nearly a quarter of my life savings in under 2 years, and 18,000 of that, more than half, had gone to a family that I'd never legally be part of, funding obligations that had no endpoint. I felt sick, not angry exactly, but sick. Because I'd done this to myself. Nobody had put a gun to my head. Maricel had never directly demanded money except for a few specific things like her daughter's tuition. Most of the requests came through Facebook messages from family members, or were situations where I offered because the need was obvious. But the system was designed to extract money from me. Not through deception, but through cultural obligation. I'd walked into blind. Every yes I'd given had made the next request easier to ask for and harder for me to refuse. Every problem I'd solved had established me as the problem solver, the foreigner with resources who could make difficulties disappear. I was funding their entire family infrastructure now. When appliances broke, when medical emergencies hit, when celebrations required money, when anything went wrong, I was the solution. Not occasionally, systemically. And I couldn't see how to stop without destroying the only relationships I had in this country, without becoming the villain in a story where I'd tried so hard to be the hero. I was trapped between two impossible choices: keep bleeding money until I had nothing left, or say no and lose everything I thought I'd built here. The community. The purpose. The feeling of being needed and wanted. But I was starting to realize I'd never actually built anything. I'd just been funding someone else's life while mine slowly drained away. The dream of affordable retirement was dead. I was living on borrowed time, watching my cushion disappear, unable to go back to Ireland because I was too proud to admit failure and too invested to walk away. January 2025. 2 years almost exactly since I'd left Dublin full of hope. 98,000 euros left in the bank. Pension barely covering monthly expenses that kept inflating. No end to the requests in sight. I was 57 years old, alone in a foreign country, supporting 23 people I barely knew because I'd been desperate enough for purpose to say yes the first time someone asked. and I had no bloody idea what to do next. February 2025. Maricel's brother came to me with a business plan. Actually printed it out, proper-looking thing with numbers and projections. He wanted to open a sari-sari store in the barangay, one of those little corner shops that sell everything from instant noodles to phone credit. We met at a cafe in Dumaguete. He laid it all out, professional-like. The store would provide steady income for the family, create jobs, maybe even reduce their dependency on me. The numbers looked reasonable. Initial investment of 180,000 pesos, about 3,000 euros for stock, shelving, refrigerator, the works. He projected profits of 12 to 15,000 pesos monthly after expenses. Said we'd split it 50-50 since I'd be providing the capital. Or, he suggested carefully, I could co-sign for a loan instead. Same amount. But the bank would provide the money. I'd just need to guarantee it. I sat there looking at those numbers, and something in my scaffolder brain finally clicked. The same instinct that had kept me from falling off buildings for 38 years, the ability to spot structural weakness before it causes collapse. This wasn't fixing a roof or paying for surgery. This was open-ended risk. This was me betting 3,000 euros on a business I had no control over, in a country where I had no legal recourse if it went sideways. If the store failed, and most small businesses do, I'd be on the hook for the loan, or I'd have lost my capital outright. I told him I needed to think about it. His smile got tighter. He said, of course, no pressure, just wanted me to know about the opportunity. Family, helping family, build something together. The reaction was immediate. Maricel went cold that same day. Her texts became short, formal. Okay. Busy. Can't today. When I asked what was wrong, she said nothing. She was just tired from work. But the warmth was gone like someone had flipped a switch. Sunday Mass became excruciating. The family members who used to greet me enthusiastically now just nodded politely. Maricel's brother walked past without a word. The nephew whose tricycle I'd fixed didn't wave. Even the kids stopped calling me Kuya Combe. I wasn't being confronted. That would violate the face-saving culture here. I was being frozen out, iced, made to understand through silence and distance that I'd disappointed them. When I finally cornered Maricel after Mass in early March, she cried. Actual tears. Said she'd never asked me for anything, had she? Her family's needs were genuine, weren't they? They'd welcomed me, fed me, treated me like blood, and this was how I repaid them? By refusing to help her brother provide for his family? Then came the line that gutted me. Maybe you never really understood Filipino values, Combe. Maybe you never really understood what family means here. The guilt was crushing. Expertly applied, whether she knew it or not. Because she was right in a way, I didn't understand. And I had taken everything they'd given me, the warmth, the acceptance, the feeling of belonging, without realizing the price tag attached. But I held firm, told her I couldn't co-sign loans or invest in businesses, that I needed to be careful with my money, that I'd already helped so much and I was worried about my own future. She looked at me like I'd slapped her, said she understood, said she needed some space to think about things. That was the last real conversation we had. March became a slow fade. She was always busy with work when I suggested meeting, couldn't make coffee, couldn't do dinner. When I showed up at the bakery, she was professional but distant. The girlfriend I'd known for nearly 2 years had been replaced by a polite stranger. I stopped going to Sunday Mass. Couldn't face the family's disappointed eyes, the polite nods that said everything their mouths wouldn't. Alone in my condo, I did what I should have done months ago. Went through everything. My entire GCash history, every bank statement, every receipt I'd saved. Made a spreadsheet with every single peso I'd spent since arriving in the Philippines. 24 months. 2 full years. The total came to 280,000 euros spent. But that included the SRRV deposit that was technically still mine, sitting in the bank. So 230,000 euros actually gone. I broke it down category by category, month by month. Rent over 24 months, averaging about 20,000 pesos monthly, about 20,000 euros total. Food averaging 13,000 pesos monthly, 16,600 euros. Utilities and internet, 5,000 euros. Visa fees and renewals, 2,800 euros. Healthcare including medication, dental work, checkups, 6,000 euros. Miscellaneous living expenses, 4,000 euros. That's 54,400 euros on my own life. On actually living here, which meant the other 75,600 euros, more than a quarter of everything I'd spent, went somewhere else. Not all of it went to Maricel's family directly, but most of it did. The surgery, the roof, 2 years of university tuition, the tricycle, appliances, medications, weddings, graduations, Christmas, 100 small emergencies that each seemed reasonable at the time, 12,000 euros. That's what I calculated went directly to them. 12,000 euros in 24 months, 6,000 euros per year. 500 euros per month on average, though it spiked much higher near the end. 12,000 euros to a family I'd never be part of, to people who'd stopped speaking to me the moment I said no to one request. I sat on my balcony overlooking Dumaguete, the sea glittering in the distance, karaoke drifting up from somewhere below, and felt the full weight of it. The relationship was over. Not officially, we hadn't had a dramatic breakup, hadn't screamed at each other, hadn't aired grievances. It just ended, faded, became nothing. And I finally understood what I'd been to her. Not a boyfriend, not really. A benefactor who happened to provide companionship. The affection might have been real. I still believe some of it was, but it was always conditional. Conditional on the money flowing, on me saying yes, on me understanding my role in the family structure they'd built around me. I wasn't calm who they loved for who I was. I was Kuya, calm the Kano with money. The solution to problems. The ATM with a heartbeat who happened to speak English and tell stories about Ireland. April. Alone in my condo, the heat pressing down. The same view I'd had for 2 years that used to feel like paradise and now just felt like a cage. I couldn't go back to Ireland. Too proud, too stubborn. How do you admit to your sister that you spent 75,000 euros in 2 years and have nothing to show for it except loneliness and the hard lesson that geography doesn't fix what's broken inside you? But I couldn't stay on this trajectory either. 98,000 euros left. At my current burn rate, even without the family expenses, I had maybe 6 years before I was broke. Less if rent kept rising, if my health deteriorated, if any real emergency hit. My pension covered rent and basics now, barely. But there was no cushion, no safety net. One bad month and I'd be back into savings. And unlike before, there was no family to help if I needed it. I'd burned that bridge by refusing to set myself on fire to keep them warm. The dream was dead. Affordable retirement in paradise. Community purpose. Family. All of it based on lies I'd told myself watching YouTube videos in Dublin, desperate for something to fill the emptiness retirement had left. I was the same man I'd been in Drimna, still purposeless, still alone. Still adrift. Just now I was that man in flip-flops instead of boots, in tropical heat instead of Irish rain, watching my savings disappear faster than I'd ever imagined. The Philippines isn't cheap when you become a family's retirement plan. That's what I'd learned. The poverty is real. The needs are genuine, but you can't save everyone. And the cultural expectation that you should try that once your family you're obligated forever is incompatible with a fixed income retirement. I'd thought I was building something. Turns out I was just funding an endless obligation that had no exit ramp except the one I'd finally taken, alone, broke, and stuck. Stuck. That's the word that haunted me. Not poor enough to leave. Not comfortable enough to relax. Not connected enough to feel at home. Just stuck. In limbo. Killing time in a place where time moved slower and cost more than the videos ever mentioned. So here I am. May 2025. Still in Dumaguete. Still in the same condo paying 22,000 pesos a month. Still completely alone. Maricel blocked me on Facebook sometime in late April. I'd sent her a message asking if we could talk, maybe work things out. She read it, didn't respond, and then I was blocked. Instagram too. Her number just goes straight to some automated message now. I don't know if she blocked me or changed it. Doesn't matter really. I see them around town sometimes. Her at the market. Her brother on his tricycle. The family at the mall. They're polite when our paths cross. Nods. Small smiles. Hello, po, sir. Like I'm a stranger who happens to look familiar. The warmth is gone. The family who called me Kuya Kom, who prayed for me, who treated me like blood, they've moved on. I was useful until I wasn't. That's the thing about Utang na Loob I finally understand. It only flows one direction. My debt to them for welcoming me into their family? That was infinite. Eternal. Eternal. A moral obligation I could never fully repay. But their debt to me for 12,000 euros in support? That evaporated the second I said no. The gratitude had an expiration date I didn't know about. I've changed my routine to avoid them. Found a different church on the other side of town. Smaller, fewer people, nobody knows me. I go more out of habit than faith at this point. Eat at different carinderias than I used to. Swim earlier in the morning when the boulevard is empty. I've become a ghost again, just like I was in Dublin. Except now, I'm a ghost with a tan. My actual costs now. Let me break it down for you properly. This is what it really costs to live in the Philippines in 2025 if you're on your own. Rent, 22,000 pesos monthly. That's 370 euros. Could I find cheaper? Sure, but moving feels like admitting defeat, and I'm too stubborn for that. Utilities? Electric runs about 2,500 pesos with the aircon. Water 500, internet 1,200. Call it 3,200 total, about 54 euros. Food, if I'm eating alone at carinderias and cooking sometimes, I'm spending about 15,000 pesos monthly now. Prices keep climbing. That's 252 euros. Medication, blood pressure pills, 2,800 pesos. Some stomach stuff now too, another 1,800. Call it 4,500 monthly, 76 euros. Internet and phone, 2,800 pesos, 47 euros. Miscellaneous, toiletries, the odd beer, jeepney rides, replacement clothes when things wear out, maybe 5,000 pesos monthly. 84 euros. Total, 55,300 pesos. That's 883 euros per month. Before any emergency, before any entertainment, before any travel or fun or anything that makes life worth living. My pension covers it. Barely. I've got maybe 50 euros left over each month if nothing goes wrong. But something always goes wrong. A tooth. A prescription change. Rent increase next year. Inflation eating away at everything. One proper emergency, and I'm back into my savings. And I've only got 98,000 euros left. The SRRV deposit sits there untouchable. At this burn rate, I've got maybe 10 years if I'm lucky and careful, less if I'm not. The YouTube videos were lies. Or not lies exactly, but they didn't show you this part. They showed the €600 budget, but they didn't account for being human, for getting sick, for prices rising 15% year over year, for the reality that foreigners pay more for everything whether you realize it or not, for the social pressure that comes with being the rich Kano even when you're not actually rich. They didn't show you the Gcash requests, the family obligations, the slow financial bleed that happens when you're desperate enough for connection to say yes to everything until no becomes impossible. Here's what I've learned, and I need you to really hear this if you're thinking about retiring here. First, the poverty is real. Grinding, desperate, everywhere you look. Maricel's family wasn't scamming me in the traditional sense. They genuinely needed help. Her father really needed that surgery. The roof really was collapsing. The medications were real. The graduations happened. In Filipino culture, when you have resources and you're part of a family, you're expected to share. That's not manipulation. That's genuine cultural expectation. The problem isn't that they were wrong. The problem is that the cultural expectation is completely unsustainable for someone on a fixed income. You cannot build a retirement on being everyone's emergency fund. There will always be another emergency, always another need, always another crisis that only your money can solve. 23 people worth of problems will drown one pensioner every single time. Second lesson, and this one's harder to admit, I came here running from emptiness, from the loss of identity when I stopped being a scaffolder, from purposelessness, from being nobody who mattered to anyone. Geography doesn't fix that. I'm still the same man I was in Drimna. I just traded Irish rain for tropical heat and learned an expensive lesson about the difference between being needed and being used. I'm not going back to Ireland, too proud, too ashamed, too far gone. How do I explain to my sister that I burned through €32,000 on a family that dropped me the second I stopped paying? How do I admit I'm more isolated now than I was when I left? So I'm stuck. That's the word. Stuck in limbo. Not poor enough to be forced to leave. Not comfortable enough to relax. Not connected enough to feel at home. Just killing time in a place where time moves slower and costs more than anyone admits. I attend a different church now to avoid running into them. Eat alone at Carinderias where nobody knows my name. Swim alone at dawn before the world wakes up. The life I imagined, community, purpose, dignity, and retirement never materialized. I traded one loneliness for another and paid €45,000 for the privilege. If you're watching this thinking about moving here, let me give you the advice I wish someone had given me. Don't come to the Philippines broke. And don't come broken. If you're running from something back home, you'll still be running when you arrive, just in flip-flops instead of boots. If you think you can live on €600 a month like those YouTube videos show, triple it. Maybe quadruple it if you're being honest. €800 to €1,000 monthly minimum once you account for healthcare, inflation, rising rents, and the reality of being foreign. If you meet someone and get involved with her family, and you will, that's how it works here. Understand you're not entering a relationship. You're entering a financial obligation structure that has no exit ramp. The needs never stop saying no makes you the villain. Budget for that reality or don't come at all. Set boundaries from day one or don't set foot in the country. I should have said from the start, I'll help you and your kids, but that's it. I didn't. Every yes made the next no harder, until no became impossible and yes became expected. The poverty is real and it will break your heart. But you can't save everyone. Trying will drown you. That's it. That's my story. 57 years old, stuck in paradise that turned into a cage, watching my savings disappear alone again. But this time I paid 75,000 euros to learn what I should have known for free. Geography doesn't fix what's broken inside you. And in the Philippines, paradise has a price tag nobody mentions on YouTube. Now you know. Do with that what you will. Combs' voice fades out. There's a moment of silence. Then the host returns. That was Combs' story, and honestly it's one we hear variations of almost weekly here at Inside the Philippines. The details change: different cities, different amounts, different names, but the core pattern stays the same. A Western man arrives looking for affordable retirement, meets someone, gets drawn into a Filipino family structure he doesn't understand, and discovers too late that the cultural expectations around family obligation are incompatible with fixed-income retirement. A few things worth clarifying. Filipino family obligation isn't some elaborate scam. It's genuine culture. Millions of Filipinos work overseas as OFWs, overseas Filipino workers sending money home to support extended family. It's normalized, expected, a moral obligation deeply embedded in the culture. When you become part of a Filipino family as a foreigner with resources, you're expected to fulfill that same role. That's not manipulation. That's culture. The problem is that most lonely Western men can't set boundaries. They're too desperate for connection, too grateful for acceptance, too hungry for purpose. So they say yes to everything until yes becomes obligation and no becomes betrayal. By the time they realize what's happening, they're in too deep to extract themselves without losing everything they think they've built. Combs still there in Dumaguete. We checked in with him before posting this. His savings are down to 95,000 euros now. He's still alone, still paying rent that keeps increasing, still stuck in that limbo between not poor enough to leave and not comfortable enough to relax. He watches other expats arrive weekly with the same hopeful delusions he had 2 years ago, and he doesn't warn them. Says it wouldn't matter if he did. People have to learn for themselves. The affordable paradise narrative you see on YouTube, it exists for some people. But those people set hard boundaries from day one. They don't get romantically involved. They don't become someone's solution to poverty. They live their quiet lives, manage their budgets, and avoid entanglement. That's possible here. But it requires a level of emotional discipline that most lonely men simply don't have. Paradise always has a price. In the Philippines, if you're not careful, that price includes becoming an ATM for people you thought were family, watching your retirement savings drain away faster than you imagined, and discovering that the warmth you thought was love was actually conditional on money you couldn't afford to give forever. This is Inside the Philippines, where we tell the stories they don't put in the travel vlogs. Take care of yourselves out there.